He was a titan of industry, a man who built an empire from steel and ambition. Julian Croft, a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms and on stock market floors. And she, Eleanor, was his crowning achievement, the elegant, devoted wife who made his perfect life complete. They had everything: the sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, the adoration of the public, a future that glittered with endless promise. But when Eleanor delivered the one piece of news that should have been their greatest joy, the fairy tale shattered. With 2 words, "It's not mine," he turned their gilded cage into a prison of doubt and cruelty. But he underestimated her. He never imagined she'd walk into his most important night of the year not as his broken wife, but as a woman on a mission, with the one man who held the secret that could destroy him forever walking by her side. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit on wealth. It was all polished chrome, black marble, and vast panes of glass that offered a godlike view of the city lights twinkling below. Eleanor Vance. For the past 3 years, Mrs. Julian Croft often felt like one of the sculptures dotting the expansive living space, beautiful, perfectly positioned, and cold to the touch. Their life was a meticulously curated performance. Julian was the brilliant self-made billionaire founder of Croft & Thorne Innovations, a tech behemoth that was reshaping the future of renewable energy. He was sharp, impossibly handsome in that severe, dark-suited way, and possessed a charisma that could charm senators and silence critics. Eleanor, with her background in art history and a quiet grace that seemed to temper his aggressive energy, was the perfect counterpart. The society pages adored them. Power Couple of the Year. The Crofts, a modern dynasty. They were a brand, and Julian was the most demanding CEO she had ever known. Tonight was no different. He had returned from a trip to Singapore, and the air was thick with his restless energy. He hadn't kissed her upon entering. He'd simply handed his coat to the housekeeper, loosened his tie, and immediately started pacing, barking into his phone about quarterly projections and a hostile takeover attempt. Eleanor waited, her hand resting almost unconsciously on her stomach. She had been waiting for the perfect moment, a fragile pocket of peace in their whirlwind life. The confirmation from Dr. Chen was 3 days old, a joyful secret she had held close, imagining the look on Julian's face. He had always spoken of a legacy, an heir to the Croft empire. This was it. This was the one thing that was real, a piece of them that wasn't for the press or the shareholders. Finally, he ended his call, tossing the phone onto a leather armchair with a sigh of irritation. They're circling like vultures, the lot of them. They think Thorne is getting soft, that his sentimentality is a liability. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed dark hair. I swear, Marcus would give the company away if he thought it would save a baby whale. Marcus Thorne was the other half of the company name, the co-founder and Julian's oldest friend. He was the engineering genius to Julian's ruthless business acumen, the steady earth to Julian's volatile fire. Eleanor had always found a quiet kindness in Marcus that was absent in her husband. "I'm sure he's just being cautious," Eleanor said, softly walking towards him. "His department is about safety and long-term viability." Julian scoffed, turning to pour himself a whiskey. "Caution doesn't get you a $10 billion valuation, Eleanor. It gets you left behind." He took a sip, the ice clinking in the heavy crystal tumbler. His eyes, the color of slate, finally settled on her. "You've been quiet all evening. Something on your mind." This was it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Something wonderful, I hope." She took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "Julian, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was not the joyful, breathless kind she had dreamed of. It was heavy, absolute, and chilling. The restless energy in the room didn't just stop, it froze. Julian's expression, which she had expected to break into a rare, genuine smile, remained perfectly still. He looked at her not as a husband, not as a father-to-be, but as if he were analyzing a flawed data point. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "I'm pregnant," she repeated, a knot of confusion tightening in her chest. "I saw Dr. Chen. I'm about 10 weeks along. We're going to have a baby, Julian." He stared at her, his gaze dropping from her eyes to her flat stomach and then back up. He slowly placed his whiskey glass on the marble bar, the click echoing in the cavernous room. And then he laughed. It wasn't a sound of mirth. It was a dry, hollow, dismissive sound that made the hairs on her arms stand up. "No," he said simply. "You're not." Eleanor blinked, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under her. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I am. I have the doctor's report, the sonogram pictures." "I'm sure you have a very convincing story, sir," he said, stepping closer. The warmth of his charisma was gone, replaced by an arctic cold. "But let me be perfectly clear, Eleanor. You may be pregnant, but the baby is not mine." Each word was a physical blow. "Julian, that's insane. How can you even say that? We're married. Who else could it possibly be?" Her voice cracked a mixture of outrage and a dawning, terrifying fear. "That's a question you're better equipped to answer than I am," he sneered. "Did you think I was that foolish? That I wouldn't notice your little friendships? The lingering glances? Did you think I built this empire by being a trusting idiot?" He was grasping at straws, inventing fantasies. There were no friendships, no lingering glances. Her life was a closed loop, revolving entirely around him. "There is no one else. You know my life. I'm with you, or I'm here. Or I'm at a charity event on your arm. You're being cruel and paranoid." "I'm being a realist," he snapped, his voice rising. "I give you this life, this apartment, the clothes on your back, the car you drive, everything. And in return, I demand one thing: loyalty. And this," he gestured vaguely towards her stomach, "is the ultimate betrayal." Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and shameful. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. "It's your child, Julian. I swear on my life, it's your child." He walked to the window, looking out at the city he owned. "It's impossible." "Why? Why is it impossible?" she cried, her voice raw. He turned back to her, his face a mask of cold fury. "Because I said so. My word is final, in my company and in my home." He paused, letting the weight of his threat settle in the air. "You have two choices. You can quietly resolve this issue. Get rid of it. We can forget this unfortunate lapse in your judgment ever occurred. Or you can continue with this farce. But if you do, you will do it alone. You will leave this apartment with nothing but the clothes you are wearing. No settlement, no alimony. Our prenuptial agreement is ironclad on matters of infidelity. I will deny the child publicly and privately, and I will drag your name through every gutter in this city until no one will even look you in the eye. Do you understand me?" The cruelty was so profound, so absolute, it stole her breath. This wasn't the man she married. Or perhaps it was exactly the man she married, and she had just been too blind to see past the polished veneer. The love she thought they shared was just another one of his assets to be managed and controlled. The mention of the prenup of infidelity, it was all a calculated attack designed to leave her powerless. He knew she had no family to run, to no independent wealth. He had made sure of that, isolating her over the years until he was her entire world. But as she stood there, stripped bare by his accusation, something inside her, something that had been dormant for 3 years, began to harden. It was a core of strength she had forgotten she possessed. He expected her to crumble, to beg to obey. She looked at him, the tears stopping. Her gaze was clear. She saw him for exactly what he was, a hollow man, terrified of something she couldn't yet understand. Why was he so certain? The word impossible echoed in her mind. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Why? You're wrong, Julian, she said, her voice quiet but firm. You're wrong about everything. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his cold eyes. Is that your final answer? I will not get rid of our baby? She said, her hand returning to her stomach, no longer unconsciously, but as a shield. And it is our baby. Then you have made your choice, he said, turning his back on her. My security will have you escorted out in the morning. Have your lawyer call mine. Or don't. It makes no difference to me. As Eleanor stood alone in the center of the vast, silent room, the city lights blurred into a meaningless smear. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. He wasn't just denying their child. He was erasing her. And in that moment she knew this wasn't just about a cruel whim. There was a deeper, darker reason for his certainty. And as a single horrifying memory from a lonely night 2 months ago surfaced in her mind, a new, even more complicated fear began to dawn. A fear that had a name: Marcus Thorne. The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated, quiet cruelty. As promised, 2 of Julian's private security guards men she had previously known by name stood impassively by her bedroom door in the morning. They were polite but firm. She was allowed 1 suitcase. They watched her as she packed their presence, a silent, suffocating judgment. She didn't pack the designer gowns or the gifted jewelry. She packed the few things that felt like hers: old books from her college days, a framed photo of her parents, the simple gold locket her grandmother had left her. She left the diamond engagement ring and the wedding band on the nightstand. They were props from a play whose run had ended. Julian was gone already, at the office, reshaping the world, destroying hers, as a casual afterthought. He communicated only through his assistant, who informed Eleanor in a clipped, impersonal email that her credit cards had been suspended and the lease on her car terminated. He was cutting her off, severing every tie with brutal efficiency. She ended up in a small, anonymous hotel room, the kind with beige walls and generic art, paying with the last few $100s she had in her purse. The sheer drop from the penthouse to this place was dizzying. One day, you're overlooking the world. The next, you're staring at a brick wall. Alone in the sterile quiet, her mind raced, replaying Julian's words. Impossible. He hadn't said, "I don't believe you." He'd said, "It's not mine," with the certainty of a mathematician stating a proven theorem. Why? They had shared a bed. They had, hadn't they? Her mind scrolled back through the last few months. Their intimate life had been infrequent, scheduled, another performance on a long list of duties. But it had happened. Unless it hadn't worked. The thought was a cold slither of dread. What if Julian knew something about himself, a secret so profound and shameful for a man of his ego that he would rather destroy his wife than ever let it see the light of day? A man who built his identity on potency in the boardroom, in the world. Could he be incapable? And as that terrifying possibility took root, another memory pushed its way to the surface, one she had buried deep under a mountain of guilt and shame. It was from a little over 2 months ago. Julian had been in Zurich for a week closing a deal. The annual Croft Foundation Gala was approaching a massive event that was Julian's personal Super Bowl. He was on the phone with her every few hours, not to connect, but to micromanage. The floral arrangements weren't right. The seating chart was a disaster. A certain politician's wife was to be seated far away from another. He was irritable, demanding, and his words were laced with a casual cruelty that had become his default. He'd ended one particularly vicious call by blaming her for a minor press leak, calling her ornamentally useless. The words had struck a nerve, hitting the core of her deepest insecurities about their marriage. She had hung up the phone, her hands shaking, feeling utterly alone in the vast, empty penthouse. She had poured herself a glass of wine, then another. The silence of the apartment was deafening. Just as she was sinking into a well of self-pity, her phone had buzzed. It was Marcus Thorne. "Eleanor," he'd said, his voice warm and concerned. "I just got off a conference call with Julian." He was unnecessarily harsh. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." It was such a small gesture, but it was the first drop of kindness she'd felt in days. The dam broke. She found herself confessing her loneliness, her feeling of being a decorative object rather than a partner. She didn't mean to, but the words just tumbled out. "He doesn't see you, Eleanor," Marcus had said softly. "He sees a reflection of himself. But the rest of us, we see you." He had been working late at the office, just a few blocks away. He'd mentioned needing to drop off some revised schematics for the gala presentation. On a whim, fueled by wine and a desperate need for a friendly face, she suggested he drop them at the penthouse. When he arrived, he wasn't the powerful executive. He was just Marcus. He had a smudge of ink on his cheek and looked tired. They sat in the kitchen, the most normal room in the apartment. He didn't drink. He just listened. He listened as she spoke about her abandoned art career, about the books she missed, reading about the simple life she sometimes craved. He understood. He spoke of his own sacrifices for the company, of the relentless pace Julian set, the humanity that was often bulldozed in the name of progress. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as Mrs. Croft, but as Eleanor. The air between them had grown thick with unspoken things. He looked at her with an empathy that felt more intimate than any touch from her husband. The shared vulnerability, the wine, the loneliness, it all converged. He had reached across the table and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. The touch was electric. It shouldn't have happened. It was a catastrophic mistake, a single desperate lapse in judgment from two lonely people. It was a brief, fumbling, guilt-ridden encounter in the guest room, a place untouched by Julian's presence. It was over almost as soon as it began, followed by a wave of immediate and profound regret from both of them. "This was a mistake," he had whispered, his face etched with shame. "I know," she had replied, unable to meet his eyes. He had left immediately. They never spoke of it again. In the weeks that followed, they were carefully polite, professionally distant at the few functions where they saw each other. Eleanor had pushed the memory down, branding it a moment of madness, a ghost she refused to acknowledge. Until now. Lying on the lumpy hotel bed, she did the math. 10 weeks. The timing was exact. A wave of nausea completely unrelated to her morning sickness washed over her. The baby. The baby that Julian swore was not his. The baby that she had in her heart believed was the one pure thing in their marriage. It was Marcus's. The realization was a cataclysm. It changed everything. Julian's cruelty wasn't paranoia. It was a lie a massive, calculated deception to cover an insecurity he couldn't bear to face. He wasn't accusing her of infidelity because he suspected it. He was accusing her because he knew for a fact that he could not be the father. He was willing to brand her an adulteress and disown a child to protect his own secret inadequacy. The anger that had been a spark was now a roaring fire. The shame and guilt she felt over her night with Marcus was still there, but they were being consumed by the sheer, unmitigated fury at Julian's deception. He was going to destroy her, make her out to be a liar and a cheat, all to hide the truth. She sat up, her mind racing. He had left her with nothing. He controlled the narrative, the money, the power. The world would believe him. An emotional, jilted wife versus a beloved billionaire titan, it was no contest. Unless she had an ally, the one other person who knew part of the truth, the one person who was as tied to this secret as she was. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. She still had his number. She knew it was a risk. He could hang up. He could deny everything. He could side with Julian, his business partner of 20 years, and leave her to drown. He had every reason to. But she also remembered the look in his eyes that night, not of conquest, but of deep, shared sadness. She remembered his kindness on the phone. He wasn't Julian. He wasn't a monster. He was a good man who had made a mistake. Taking a shaky breath, she typed out a message, her thumb hovering over the send button. "Marcus, it's Eleanor. I need to see you. It's about Julian. It's about everything, please." She hit send, and the little blue message sat there, delivered but unread. Every second that passed felt like an hour. Her entire future and the future of her unborn child now hinged on the reply of the one man Julian Croft had ever considered his equal. The reply came 20 minutes later. It was a simple, "Where?" Eleanor sent the hotel address, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. An hour later, there was a soft knock on the door. When she opened it, Marcus Thorne stood in the drab hallway, looking profoundly out of place in his tailored suit. His expression was a mixture of deep concern and weary resignation, as if he had been expecting this call for months. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, stepping back to let him in. The room seemed to shrink with his presence. No, I'm not." He took in the anonymous hotel room, the single suitcase, her pale, drawn face. His jaw tightened. It was Julian. What did he do? The story came tumbling out, the pregnancy announcement, Julian's cold, immediate denial, the accusation of infidelity, the ultimatum, and being thrown out of her home. She left out the crucial detail, the paternity wanting to see his face, to gauge his reaction. As she spoke, Marcus's expression shifted from concern to a slow-burning anger. He didn't seem surprised by Julian's cruelty, which was in itself telling. He was familiar with that side of his partner. "The prenup," he said, more a statement than a question. "He's citing the infidelity clause to leave you with nothing." "Exactly," she whispered. "He's going to ruin me, Marcus. He'll tell the world I cheated on him, and everyone will believe him." Marcus paced the small room, his movements tight with contained fury. "That bastard! That magnificent hollow bastard!" He stopped and looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "There's something you're not telling me." His denial. "You said it was absolute, as if it were impossible. Why, this was it." Eleanor took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "Because I think he knows he can't be the father. I think Julian is infertile." The color drained from Marcus's face. He sank, onto the edge of the uncomfortable armchair, running a hand over his face. He looked utterly devastated. "I always suspected," he breathed. "Years ago, his first fiancée, Amelia. They were together for 5 years. She desperately wanted a family. It was the official reason for their breakup. She wanted kids. He was focused on the business. He spun it as him being the noble one, letting her go to find happiness. But I always wondered. He would rather destroy me and his own child than admit it," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus looked up, and in his eyes she saw the full weight of the truth dawning. His next words were quiet, heavy, with a significance that filled the space between them. "It's not his own child, is it, Eleanor?" The question hung in the air. There was no accusation in his tone, only a deep, profound sadness. Tears welled in her eyes as she finally nodded. "No, the timing, it's yours." He closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. The sound he made was a quiet groan of despair. "Oh God, Eleanor, I'm so sorry." He wasn't denying it. He wasn't running. He was accepting his part in it, his shame and regret palpable. "I'm sorry too, Marcus," she wept. "It was one night, a terrible mistake. But this baby is not a mistake. And Julian is going to erase it. He's going to brand me a whore, and this child a bastard, all to protect his fragile ego." Marcus was silent for a long time, staring at the faded carpet. The gears were turning in his mind, the mind of an engineer, a problem solver, an architect of complex systems. He was analyzing the variables, the stresses, the potential points of failure. Finally, he looked up, and the despair in his eyes had been replaced by something else, steel. A quiet, unshakable resolve. "No," he said, his voice firm. "No, he is not." He stood up, his demeanor changing. The weary friend was gone, replaced by the formidable co-founder of Croft and Thorne. "This is not just about his ego, Eleanor. It's about control. Julian's entire world is built on a narrative of his own, making a story of flawless success and virility. A child he cannot father is a flaw in the code he cannot tolerate. A wife who defies him is a variable he must eliminate. But he's made a critical error. He's underestimated you. And he's forgotten that I know where all the weaknesses in his system are." "What can we do?" Eleanor asked, a fragile spark of hope igniting within her. "He has all the power." "He has the appearance of power," Marcus corrected her. "That's his strength and his greatest vulnerability. His image is everything. So that's what we target. We don't fight him in a courtroom he can bury in legal fees for a decade. We don't fight him in the press he can buy and manipulate. We fight him on his own turf, on his biggest stage." He began to pace again, but this time it was with purpose, with energy. "The Croft Foundation Gala is in 2 weeks. It's the pinnacle of his year. He'll be there on stage, accepting awards, basking in the glow of public adoration. He'll feel untouchable. It is the single most important night for his public image." A plan began to form in his eyes, brilliant and terrifying in its audacity. "He's thrown you out. He's counting on you to disappear, to crawl away, and hide in shame. He would never, in a million years, expect you to show up at his gala." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Show up, Marcus? They wouldn't let me pass the door. You won't be going as Eleanor Croft, the disgraced wife," Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. "You'll be going as my guest." The audacity of it was breathtaking. His business partner, arriving with the wife he'd just publicly discarded, the scandal. "Exactly," Marcus said. "It will be a quiet explosion. It will set the stage. But it's not enough. A scandal is just gossip. We need proof. We need incontrovertible truth. He stopped in front of her. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and it's difficult. But it's the only way. Will you consent to a DNA test? A prenatal paternity test. We can have the results expedited. It's my child. I will claim him or her proudly, and we will have the proof. Eleanor stared at him. He wasn't shying away. He was stepping up, taking responsibility in a way Julian never could. He was offering her not just a lifeline, but a sword. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. Yes, I will. Good. Marcus nodded his mind, already moving to the next step. I have a trusted family lawyer, not a corporate shark like Julian's pit bulls. We'll get everything documented. We will get the test done under a full chain of custody so its validity is unimpeachable, and we will prepare a statement. He looked at her, his expression serious. This will not be easy. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Walking into that room will feel like walking into a lion's den, but you will not be alone. I will be with you every step of the way. For the first time since this nightmare began, Eleanor felt a surge of real hope. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. Julian had built his kingdom on a foundation of lies, and they were about to expose the truth in the most public way imaginable. They were going to detonate a bomb in the middle of his perfect, curated world. He's giving a speech that night, Eleanor remembered. The keynote address about the legacy of innovation. Marcus's smile was grim but genuine. Perfect. He loves the sound of his own voice. He'll be on stage in the spotlight right where we want him. Let's give him a legacy he never saw coming. The 2 weeks leading up to the gala were the strangest of Eleanor's life. They were a period of clandestine activity and quiet resolve, a stark contrast to the loud public drama she knew was coming. Marcus moved her from the dreary hotel to a discreet, furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place that didn't scream wealth, but offered safety and anonymity. He was a man of his word. The day after their meeting, Eleanor met with his lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Alani, who specialized in complex family law. Alani listened to the entire story with a focused intensity, her expression hardening as Eleanor recounted Julian's threats. The prenatal paternity test was arranged through a private, highly reputable lab. The process was clinical and nerve-wracking, but Marcus was there waiting in the lobby, a silent pillar of support. Waiting for the results was agony. For Eleanor, it was confirmation of a life-altering truth. For Marcus, it was the formal acceptance of a future he had never planned. When Alani called with the results, there was a quiet solemnity in the room. A 99.999% probability. He was the father. Marcus held the printed report in his hands, staring at the clinical text that bound him to Eleanor and this child forever. He didn't say anything for a long time, then folded the paper carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Okay, he said, as if a great weight had finally settled. Now we have the truth. Their relationship in those 2 weeks was a delicate, undefined thing. It was not a romance. The guilt of their shared mistake was still a tangible presence, a ghost in the room. But beneath it, a new foundation was being laid, one of mutual respect, shared purpose, and a surprising tenderness. Marcus would visit in the evenings, after grueling days at the office, where he had to maintain a facade of normality with Julian. He described the atmosphere at Crofton Thorne as toxic. Julian was on a warpath, more arrogant and demanding than ever, emboldened by his perceived victory over his defiant wife. He'd made a few smug remarks to Marcus about trimming dead weight and the importance of unquestioning loyalty remarks that Marcus had to swallow with a calm demeanor that cost him dearly. During his visits, he and Eleanor would plan. They strategized their arrival, the timing, the exact moment of their entrance. But more often than not, they would just talk. He would ask about the baby, about how she was feeling, with a genuine concern that twisted her heart. He brought her books he thought she would like, and takeout from a small Thai restaurant he loved. In these quiet moments, she saw the man she had glimpsed on that one lonely night. He was intelligent, funny in a dry, self-deprecating way, and deeply principled. He spoke of his passion for the innovation part of their company, named the actual science which Julian only ever saw as a vehicle for profit. She realized with a pang of regret that under any other circumstances they could have been wonderful friends. One evening as they sat in the small living room, Eleanor found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Marcus, why did you never have a family? You'd be a wonderful father." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his cup of tea. "I was engaged once," he said softly, echoing what he'd told her about Julian's ex, "to a woman I loved very much. We were young. Julian and I had just gotten our first round of major funding. The company was everything. It demanded 100-hour weeks, constant travel, absolute devotion. Julian thrived on it. I went along. My fiancée Sarah, she said, I was married to the job and that Julian was a jealous spouse. She was right." He gave a sad smile. "I chose the company. I chose my partnership with Julian. By the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late. After that, I just focused on the work. It was easier." His confession laid bare the depth of Julian's influence, not just on her life, but on his as well. They were two people orbiting a destructive sun, and they were only now realizing the cost of its gravity. The preparations for the gala were Eleanor's declaration of war. She couldn't afford a designer gown, so she found a small boutique run by an aspiring young designer. She chose a dress of deep emerald green silk. It was simple, elegant, and cut in a way that didn't hide her burgeoning pregnancy, but framed it with a quiet dignity. It was the antithesis of the glittering armor-like gowns Julian had always picked for her. This was her own choice. Meanwhile, Julian's camp was unknowingly preparing the stage for their own demise. Eleanor received a formal, couriered letter from Julian's lawyer, a final arrogant dismissal. It offered a one-time nuisance value settlement of $10,000 in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement of terrifying scope, which would legally bar her from ever speaking of Julian or their marriage again. It also included a clause where she would have to publicly state that her pregnancy was the result of an affair with an unnamed party. She handed the letter to Marcus. He read it, his face turning to stone. "He wants to script your confession. My God." He tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. His arrogance will be his undoing. The night before the gala, a package arrived for Eleanor. It was a small, flat box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a simple, elegant necklace of white gold with a single, small pearl. The card read, "For courage, M." Later that evening, another more formidable visitor appeared at her door. Beatrice Croft, Julian's mother, a woman carved from ice, draped in Chanel. She'd clearly pulled strings to find Eleanor's location. "I thought I would find you in a place like this," Beatrice said, her eyes sweeping the apartment with disdain. She didn't wait for an invitation to enter. "I am here to appeal to whatever common sense you have left." I don't think you and I have the same definition of common sense, Beatrice, Eleanor replied, her voice steady. My son provides a life of unparalleled luxury. All he asks for in return is discretion. You have failed spectacularly on that front, she sniffed. This situation, it's a disgusting common little mess, but it can still be cleaned up. Take the settlement, disappear. Have your sordid little affairs, baby, in obscurity where it belongs. Don't try to attach it to our name. It's not about the money, Eleanor said, clutching the pearl at her neck. It's about the truth. Your son is a liar. Beatrice laughed a brittle, ugly sound. Oh, you sweet fool. Of course he is. They all are. Truth is a currency for the poor. For people like us, there is only power, and the narrative we choose to create. And you, my dear, are about to be written out of it. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight him. He will burn your entire world to the ground to protect himself. He learned that from the best. The undisguised threat hung in the air. This was the source of Julian's coldness, his ruthlessness. It was inherited, nurtured. Eleanor met the older woman's gaze without flinching. Then maybe it's time someone lit a fire under his. Beatrice stared at her, a flicker of something, perhaps grudging respect, perhaps disbelief, in her cold eyes. She turned on her heel. You will regret this, she said. And then she was gone. After she left, Eleanor's resolve wavered for a moment. The sheer power of the Croft machine was terrifying. But then she thought of the child growing inside her, a child who deserved a name and a truth. She thought of Marcus, a good man, trapped in a bad partnership who was risking everything for her. And she thought of Julian, standing on a stage preaching about legacy. Her resolve hardened again. Beatrice was wrong. Truth wasn't a currency for the poor, it was a weapon. And tomorrow night, they were finally going to use it. The grand imperial ballroom was drowning in splendor. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto a sea of black tie and couture. The air hummed with the buzz of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes and the low thrum of a string quartet. This was Julian Croft's cathedral, and tonight he was its god. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs as the car, one of Marcus's own, pulled up to the red carpet. The flashing of paparazzi cameras was a blinding, disorienting wall of light. For a moment, her courage failed her. This was madness. They would be devoured. Marcus must have sensed her fear. He placed a steadying hand on hers. Deep breath, Eleanor. We walk through the fire together. Look straight ahead. Don't look at them. Look at me if you have to. We have the truth. They have nothing. He got out, and a murmur went through the press line. Marcus Thorne. Then he opened her door, and the murmur exploded into a cacophony of shouted questions and frantic clicks. Is that Eleanor Croft? Mrs. Croft, what are you doing here? Are you here with Mr. Thorne? She took his offered arm, her knuckles white. She was wearing the emerald dress, a slash of defiant color in a sea of black and metallics. The pearl necklace was cool against her skin, a small, solid anchor in the storm. They walked not quickly, but with a deliberate, unhurried pace, ignoring the shouted questions. They didn't stop to pose. They were not there for the cameras. Their audience was inside. Entering the ballroom was like stepping into another dimension. The noise of the press faded, replaced by the sophisticated hum of the city's elite. And as they entered, a wave of silence spread outwards from the door. Conversations stuttered and died. Heads turned, eyes widened. Every person in that room knew that Eleanor Croft had been unceremoniously discarded by her husband. To see her here looking radiant and defiant on the arm of his business partner, it was a declaration of war. They saw Julian immediately. He was holding court near the stage, a glass of champagne in hand, laughing with a senator. His back was to them, but he felt the shift in the room's atmosphere. He turned, his smile freezing on his face. The look in his eyes was one of pure, venomous disbelief. It was the look of a king who discovers a peasant rebellion in his own throne room. For a split second, his mask of charismatic control slipped, revealing the furious, panicked tyrant beneath. He saw Eleanor. He saw her dress, the gentle swell of her stomach, and he saw her hand resting on Marcus Thorne's arm. His eyes darted from her to Marcus, and a dark, dangerous understanding dawned. This was not a coincidence. This was a coordinated attack. Eleanor and Marcus did not approach him. That was part of the plan. They simply took a table that Marcus had reserved, a table in the center of the room, in plain sight of everyone. They sat, and Marcus calmly ordered them both sparkling water. They were an island of quiet purpose in a sea of frantic whispering. The next hour was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Julian was trapped. He couldn't make a scene. It would be a confession of weakness. He couldn't ignore them. Their presence was a sucking wound in the center of his perfect party. He tried to continue his conversations, but his eyes kept flicking back to their table. His jaw was clenched so tight, Eleanor thought his teeth might crack. Beatrice Croft, seated at the head table, stared at them with a look of pure hatred. Finally, the time came for the main event. The lights dimmed. The chairman of the foundation board went on stage and began a glowing introduction for the man of the hour. A visionary, a philanthropist, a man whose name is synonymous with the future, Julian Croft. The room erupted in applause. Julian walked onto the stage, regaining his composure under the warm bath of the spotlight. He smoothed his tuxedo, stepped up to the podium, and beamed at the crowd, the very picture of success and power. He looked everywhere but at their table. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "Tonight, we celebrate innovation. But more than that, we celebrate legacy. What is a legacy? It's not just about profit margins or stock prices. It's about building something that lasts. It's about truth, integrity, and creating a better future for the generations to come. For our children." The hypocrisy was so staggering, Eleanor felt lightheaded. Marcus put a hand on her arm, a silent, "Wait." Julian was warming up now, hitting his stride. A legacy is built on a foundation of strength, of honesty. It means facing challenges head-on, cutting away weakness, and never ever compromising on the core principles of truth. "Then why are you lying, Julian?" The voice was not Eleanor's. It was Marcus's, calm, clear, and amplified by the perfect acoustics of the ballroom. It cut through Julian's speech like a shard of glass. A collective gasp went through the audience. Julian froze at the podium, his face a mask of fury. "I beg your pardon," he said into the microphone, his voice dripping with menace. Marcus stood up, his hand resting gently on Eleanor's shoulder. "You're talking about truth and legacy, yet you stand on this stage having built your personal legacy on a foundation of lies. You publicly discarded your wife, accusing her of infidelity to hide your own secret." Julian's face went white. "Security, Bert," he snarled into the mic. "Remove this man. He's clearly had too much to drink." But the security guards hesitated, looking at the co-founder of the company. This wasn't some random heckler. "I'm perfectly sober, Julian," Marcus said, his voice ringing with authority, And I think your guests, the people here to celebrate your integrity, deserve to know the truth. You didn't leave your wife. You threw her out because she is pregnant. You told her the child was not yours, and you were right. The room was utterly silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Eleanor stood up, her legs trembling, and faced the stage, facing Julian. "The baby isn't yours, Julian," she said, her voice, shaking but clear, picked up by the microphone's field. "Because you and I both know you can't have children." A tremor went through the crowd. This was no longer just a scandal. This was a Shakespearean tragedy unfolding in real time. Julian's composure finally spectacularly shattered. "You lying, treacherous whore!" he roared, forgetting the microphone was live, his voice booming through the ballroom. "You dare to come into my house and say this? This isn't your house, Julian. It's a rented ballroom," Marcus said coolly. "And we didn't come with accusations. We came with proof." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded DNA report. He held it up. "This is a certified, legally admissible prenatal paternity test. It proves with 99.999% certainty that I, Marcus Thorne, am the father of Eleanor's child." The shockwave that hit the room was immense. It was a plot twist no one had seen coming. The business partner, the quiet one. "Eleanor and I made a terrible mistake," Marcus continued, his voice resonating with sincerity and regret. "One we will both live with for the rest of our lives. But this child is not a mistake. This child is a fact, and it deserves a father who will claim it, not a coward who would disown it to protect his own vanity." All eyes were on Julian. He was cornered, exposed, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him in front of his most important audience. His face was a terrifying mixture of rage and panic. He looked from the paper in Marcus's hand to Eleanor's defiant face, to the hundreds of staring, judging eyes. He did the only thing a cornered narcissist could do. He deflected. He attacked. "He's lying. They're in this together. A conspiracy to take my company," he yelled, his voice cracking. "She was always after the money. He was always jealous, but the narrative was no longer his to control." The sight of the calm, resolute couple and the damning piece of paper was more powerful than his frantic denials. They had the one thing he didn't, the ring of truth. Eleanor took a step forward. "Was it for money, Julian? Or was it because you told me I was ornamentally useless, because you treated me like an object you owned?" "This happened," she said, gesturing between herself and Marcus, "because for one night someone showed me kindness instead of contempt. And this," she said, her hand on her stomach, "happened because you are a fraud. Your entire legacy is a lie." That was the final blow. Julian stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The king had been dethroned. The god had been revealed as a mere mortal, and a petty, cruel one, at that. He stumbled back from the podium, his face ashen, and fled the stage, a desperate, graceless retreat from the truth he could no longer escape. In the stunning silence that followed, Eleanor and Marcus stood together in the center of the room. They hadn't won a battle of insults or legal threats. They had won a war of truth, and everyone in the room knew it. The aftermath was exactly as explosive as they had anticipated. The gala ended in chaos. Guests fled as if from a fire, their phones already ablaze with the news. By the time Marcus and Eleanor reached the car, Croft Gala was the #1 trending topic worldwide. The story was everywhere, a sensational cocktail of sex lies and corporate power. But the narrative was not the one Julian would have written. The press, smelling blood in the water and sensing a deeper story, did not automatically brand Eleanor the cheating wife. Marcus's calm public acceptance of responsibility and his focus on Julian's lie had reframed the entire event. The headlines were brutal Croft empire, built on lie billionaire's infertility secret, exposed in Gala, showdown Thorn. Claims, paternity accuses, partner of cruelty. The Croft and Thorn board of directors convened an emergency meeting the very next day. Julian's public meltdown, coupled with the revelation of his deception and the instability it created, was a breach of trust they could not ignore. Faced with a vote of no confidence and the very real threat of Marcus exercising his significant shareholding power to force him out, Julian had no choice. He resigned, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. The empire he had built to feed his ego had devoured him whole. For Eleanor, the victory felt strange. There was relief, a profound bone-deep relief that the truth was out. There was a sense of justice that Julian had finally been held accountable for his cruelty. But there was no joy. Watching the man she had once loved, or thought she loved, be so thoroughly and publicly destroyed left a hollow ache in her chest. It was the tragic end to a story that should have been beautiful. She and Marcus retreated from the world, letting the lawyers handle the fallout. Julian, true to his mother's word, tried to fight back, launching a smear campaign through proxies, but it was too late. The truth had too much momentum. He eventually accepted a buyout of his shares, a golden parachute that still left him an obscenely wealthy man. But he was exiled from the world he had once ruled. He became a recluse, a ghost in his own penthouse. In the quiet months that followed, Eleanor and Marcus navigated the delicate, complicated space between them. The world assumed they were a couple, a dramatic romance born of scandal. The reality was quieter, more complex. They were two people bound by a child, learning to be partners. They talked for hours about their mistake, about the guilt, and about the future. He never pressured her, never assumed a role in her life that she didn't offer. He was patient, kind, and unfailingly supportive. He was there for every doctor's appointment, his face a mixture of awe and terror as he watched the baby on the sonogram screen. He took over as CEO of the newly rebranded Thorn Innovations, steering the company with a steady hand and a renewed focus on ethical practice. The sentimentality Julian had so often mocked became the company's greatest strength. 6 months after the gala, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Arthur. He had her eyes and Marcus's calm, steady gaze. Marcus was there in the delivery room, holding her hand, his face etched with a profound, overwhelming love as he looked at his son for the first time. In that moment, all the scandal, the drama, and the pain seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the simple, powerful reality of this new life. Their new home was not a penthouse. It was a comfortable house with a small garden filled with books and the smell of baby powder. It was filled with a quiet laughter that was more valuable than all the chrome and marble in the world. Their relationship grew not with the fire of a whirlwind romance, but with the slow, steady warmth of a hearth. It was built on a foundation not of lies or ambition, but of shared responsibility, forgiveness, and a deep, abiding respect. One sunny afternoon, Eleanor was in the garden, watching Marcus rock a sleeping Arthur in his arms. He looked up and caught her watching him, a gentle smile on his face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. She smiled back, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. "I was just thinking about legacies," she said. Julian was so obsessed with his. The buildings, the money, the name, but he didn't understand. She walked over to him, placing a hand on Arthur's tiny back. This is a legacy, truth, kindness, a safe place to fall asleep. It turns out, it's all I ever really wanted. Marcus leaned in and kissed her a soft, simple kiss that held all the promise of a future they would build together, one truthful day at a time. The fall of a powerful man is always a spectacle, but the story of Eleanor, Julian, and Marcus is more than just a drama of wealth and betrayal. It's a powerful reminder that the most unbreakable prison is not one of steel bars, but one of lies we tell ourselves. Julian Croft had an empire, but he was a pauper in the things that truly matter: truth, courage, and love. Eleanor left with nothing, found everything when she chose to fight for the truth, not just for herself, but for her unborn child. She proved that real strength isn't about how much you can control, but about how much you can endure and rebuild. What did you think of Eleanor's incredible choice to face her tormentor? Was Marcus a hero, or just a man making amends for his own mistake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of justice and resilience moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with a friend who loves a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.